Hey, CDA, and today in Foundry we are going to turn this starting facility into an actual big boy facility, because honestly we have a lot of power at our disposal, but we're not really doing much with it other than just producing some basic materials. Now, one thing I didn't actually realize when we built this starting facility last time around is that the production of the science is actually not the bottleneck. It's the consumption of that science by the actual research station. As you can see, this is going to go in a very slow speed, but the production of our science is actually a lot faster than the consumption. So we can easily fix that by just adding in a couple more of those science facilities. Now, honestly, this is far from a perfect solution, but I don't want to spend too much time on optimizing this science when we're actually about to unlock the next tier of science as well. And this is actually going to use completely different types of resources. Well, normally you see that you use similar resources to the first type of science into the second one, but this is a completely different recipe. Also, something to note that clicking around in this research tree is a little bit counterintuitive, because every time you click on something it only shows you what is beneath that, which I kind of get. But honestly, if you want to navigate what you can actually research, you should just be looking at the left side of your screen, because all of these yellow, greenish types of things are the things you can unlock. The only problem with this is that it doesn't actually show you what you need in order to unlock the stuff you can't access yet. So you kind of need to use a combination of both, but anyway, just mostly pick the things that are actually useful in terms of production, and things like, I don't know, ladders and doors, of course, are useful to have, but not necessarily vital to your progress through the game. Speaking of progress through the game, in order to unlock the Science Pack 2, or at least make the Science Pack 2, I should say, we actually need conveyors and building blocks to make this. Now, I'm not entirely sure what the logic behind that is, but honestly, it's kind of smart, I think, from the developers, because this gives you a perfect reason to automate the production of these base type of things that you're going to need a lot of. And you're going to do that both because you're going to need a lot of these things, but you're also going to need it for science. So it's just a way to kind of gently push maybe new players into making them all. I don't know, let's do it anyway. Okay, so we're going to need a fair amount of conveyors and building blocks, and as you can see, the ratios are a little bit weird. At least they're not really nice round numbers, so that makes the math a little bit complicated, but we'll get to it. Now, in order to make the conveyors, we're going to need xenovariate plates as well as machinery parts. For the building blocks, we're going to need plates and rods. And as you might remember from the last time, in order to make machinery parts, we're going to need, yes, more plates. So plates are definitely going to be our bottleneck, and the 6 per minute design that I just decided on is actually tuned in such a way that we're going to use all the plates we're currently producing. In order to get things going, I actually flattened the terrain a little bit, because I wanted to have everything at the same level as our original rod production. Now, that means that some of the other things are a little bit lower in terms of the height of the buildings, but that's something we'll just need to deal with, because honestly the terrain is going to go up and down anyway. But this seems to be a height that for this entire valley is at least not below most of the things that are sticking out. So that means that we should be able to build a fairly flat factory, and we don't have to deal with too much ups and downs along the way. Also, let me know in the comments, are we going to be calling this Science Pack 1 and Science Pack 2, or are we just going to call this Blue Science and Red Science? Because honestly, I'm leaning towards the latter, because that happens to coincide with how it works in the Satisfactory program, but let me know what you think. Either way, in order to get 6 of each type of science, we're going to need 80 machinery parts per minute, which means we need exactly 2 machines. Actually, it's slightly less than that, but I'm just rounding the numbers down so we have nice numbers. And, well, I'm going to align the assemblers to actually be exactly in line with the production we already have up and running, because that's going to allow me to keep these belts nice and straight and running right through here. And then on the other side, I'm actually having the outputs, and then I'm once again going to put them in the box for now, so we don't have any of our production time going to waste. Now, I do like keeping a certain design to my systems, so what I'm doing over here, I'm basically using this as a buffer box. So as you can see, the belt is actually running straight through here. That means that all the production that is not being taken up by the box is just going to be put on the belt, but if there's any reason that this production stops for whatever moment, the resulting production is still going to go into this box, unless, like now, it's completely full. But as you can see, we have a lot of that stored up already. Similarly, the inputs here are always going to be on the first slot of the building, and then the outputs are always going to be on the last slot of the building. Now, other than the fact that that's actually pretty efficient from an amount of belts that you need in order to get to the final part of the production, it also makes it a little easier to tell what the in and outputs are, other than the color, of course, helping with that as well. But similarly, intake for the buffer box over here, again, is going to be the first slot. So once I start exporting that, I can just have the belt continue on like that. And by doing so, you basically get a repeating type of setup in every part of our factory. For the blue signs, we're going to need 3 assemblers making that, and again I'm going to put a box in here just to make sure we can stock up on the signs if we're not actually using it. I am actually leaving a little bit of room between all our production areas because that's a mistake I've made probably 100 times by now. Every time I start building a small factory in the beginning of the game, I always forget that at some point you want to scale up. And you're going to need that space, even if it's just for belts and stuff like that in order to get things out of there. And I'm also intentionally building this from a, well, not necessarily east to west direction or anything like that, but I am trying to keep in mind that if I'm going to be expanding the base production, I'm going to do that in that direction where we don't have anything yet. And then I'm basically going to go more and more complex as we move towards this mountain over here. That's at least for now the idea. I'm probably going to have to change that up a couple of times. But it's good to have kind of a plan in which direction you're going to expand your factory, both in terms of the base production, which you're going to need more of, as well as the more advanced production. Now, we're going to need some belts in here. There we go, we have the first materials moving already, and there is something new on the other side of this building as well, because as you can see, I'm now using the second version of the loaders as well. These actually expand 2 slots out, so you can actually use 2 belts on each side. So you can use these again both as inputs and outputs, of course, but right now I'm just using the inner lanes for the inputs and then the outer lanes, at least this outer lane specifically, for the output. And you can see, look, we have some signs of production here, and it is already going into this little box over here. Okay, so actually I kind of changed my mind here, and I might be completely over-designing a fairly simple factory, but I just realized that we're actually going to need the other half of the plates as well, and if I place them, the assemblers making the machine parts in the place where I used to have them, it was actually going to be really messy bringing those plates in. So I just moved this production line up a little closer to the actual production of the signs over here. That hasn't moved at all. So I'm now connecting it to the secondary belt of plates. That leaves us this room on the left side over here to bring in these plates over here to start producing conveyors as well as the building blocks. So I'm going to bring up that secondary line of plates, and I'm going to feed that right next to the facility that we already have up and running, and then around the corner you'll see why in a moment. But that is going to feed into a single assembler making conveyor belts. Now the conveyor belts are being output on this side and are once again going to be put in a box, so we have easy access to that if we need them. If we do that, we only need to extend the rods belt a little bit further beyond where we're producing the blue science, and then on the other side, this is the belt coming in around the corner. We can then split that off to the opposite side of where the machinery parts are going and feed that into this assembler making the building blocks. And again, of course, these are being outputted and put into a storage box as well. So just to give you an overview, we are producing the machinery parts pretty much on the same location where our landing vehicle used to be, and yes, you can actually delete that. As you can see, we have that belt going around the corner into the blue science production. Then in parallel to where we're producing the machine parts, we're producing the conveyor belts, and then right below where I'm currently standing is where we're producing the building blocks themselves. And that means that we have the 2 items that we need for the red science production in these 2 storage facilities over here right next to each other. This makes it really easy to actually put all the stuff on the belts and put it next to each other, and that means we can easily set up 3 of these assemblers making a red science in order to get that into production as well, which is a good thing because I ran out of blue science stuff to research, so now we need both red and blue science to progress any further. Similar to the isosphere program, the signs won't actually be processed unless you put both types of sciences into the same factory, so we're going to need to bring those belts together. But luckily, because we set up the production the way we did, we now have both the red science production and blue science production really close together, so it's really easy to just hook those up right next to each other in terms of the belts, and then place about 6 of these research centers next to each other to make sure we have a decent speed of processing all of that, because honestly, processing science, as you can see, is not necessarily the fastest thing in this game as well. So we have red science up and running, and I'm trying to get up here to show you once again. There we go. It actually fits right in between the rod production, the plate production, and all in all, Can I make this jump? Nope. All in all, we have quite a bit of production up and running already. So like I said, this is turning into quite a big boy facility because we're doing quite a few things. Now, honestly, this production line over here, where I had the blue science production initially set up, is completely redundant now, so we can take that out. And that, again, gives us some room to expand. But all in all, looking pretty good, I would say. Now, while we're plugging away at our science, let's actually start making some of the other intermediate products as well, because we are currently not making wire coils and electronic components, although they are pretty easy to make, because from wires we only need the Technum rods, which we already have in production. We actually quite have a surplus of those as well. And with the wire coils, along with some more rods, we can actually make the electronic components as well. So, all in all, that's pretty straightforward, and we honestly only need a couple of assemblers to do exactly that. And as you can see, this is a super simple setup, but it's actually going to be quite useful, so I don't need to start handcrafting all these wires and electronic components all the time. Just a little bit of a time saver. Now, what I've actually done over here is have the storage unit only draw rods from this, so I also have a storage unit that actually actively gathers some rods for me. Now, I like keeping these things small, even though 1600 might not seem like small. The larger sizes actually store up a lot more stuff. So basically the way this works, if I ever need rods for myself, I just pick them up from this container. That will temporarily reduce the production of these wires and electronic components, but, well, honestly, I'm probably going to need these more than I need the rods, so that will just level itself out pretty quickly. Now, it's worth noting that resources do actually run out in this game, even though it's going to be really slowed, so it's not really something you have to worry about for a pretty long time. As well, as you can see, that both bots are actually digging into the ground, so there's a lot more hiding underneath this initial layer. But we're not quite done scaling up just yet, and in order to do that we are going to need some steel, and in order to make steel I'm going to actually have to blend two different types of resources into one. So I need the xenoverite as well as the ignium ore. We put those into a blender. Well, this technically it's called a crusher, but blender just sounds better because it's, well, blending two resources together. And we're going to need a fair amount of xenoverite ore as well as ignium in order to do exactly that. Now, remember how I initially started building pretty much on the same level as where the ground was? Makes sense, of course, in the Euler game. I actually want to level everything a little bit more neatly than it is right now, which means I'm probably going to have to remove these mining stations over here and make a more efficient layout. Okay, so here's what I came up with. I actually extended the platform on the horizontal level like everything else was already. I removed all the other buildings that you just saw, and I included some mining slits above the actual ore. So what we can do now is actually just build something like this, for example. And as you can see, the ore below is still lighting up, so the bots will still be able to reach that. And the robots can actually fly into the slits in order to pick up all the stuff they need to get down there. Now, what this allows me to do is actually include a lot more mining machines on top of the actual ore, which just makes it more efficient for the bots to get there. Now, depending on where you put your slits, you could make as much as probably something like 4 rows of mining machines to do exactly that. But honestly, that might be slightly overkill, not entirely sure just yet. For now, I think we'll have enough with 6 mining machines over here. That's enough for 2 full Mark 1 belts. One of those is still going into the original facility that we built earlier, but the second one is going to go into a steel facility that I'm going to be building over here. In order to get a decent amount of steel going, you only need 1 or 2 crushers, and honestly 1 is probably enough, but I went with 2 because that exactly uses up a full Mark 1 belt of xenoferrite ore. Does that need to happen like that? Nope, not really. But, well, why not? I'm actually also using the same belt as we are using to supply our power buildings over here. Why? Well, because they're actually not drawing that much of the ore from the belt, so I might as well use the same belt to get some steel going on top of that. Then, for every crusher that you have making the blend, you're going to want to have 2 of these smelters making the actual steel. And as you can see, we had 2 crushers, so 4 of these make a plenty of steel. And now we have access to steel, we can move on to something more exciting. You might have already noticed this beautiful pond of water out here, and I built a nice little platform towards that because we're going to be working on steam power. Now, steam power is actually 100% efficient, there's nothing being lost in the process, and in order to make that, we're going to have to bring some fuel, add some water, get some steam going, and then the turbines will do the rest. Now, I actually kind of like the way fluids work in this game because, for example, in order to get the water flowing, you're going to need one of these intakes. You just submerge them underwater and they will pump up the water automatically. So you can actually see there's already water flowing in this. There's no pumps needed or anything like that. However, there are still pumps in the game though, however, and you use them to make sure the liquid keeps flowing at a pretty decent pace. Now, honestly, putting it in front of a building like I've done over here doesn't really work because, well, if it's slowed down over here, then this last little bit is not going to make much difference, but still, just to demonstrate you the purpose. Now, the water is going to go into this boiler over here, and then it's going to be spouting out steam on the side, assuming we actually fuel it, because it needs something to burn. Luckily, we have over here the mining location for our ignium ore, and that is a fuel, so we can add in another one of those mining slits over there and get that flowing. There we go. I'm really liking how efficient these mining slits are operating, and we have another belt of ignium ore over here. Now, honestly, ignium ore is very slow to consume, so I don't necessarily need 3 miners on every belt, but there's no reason not to do that either. So as you can see, we are now putting the fuel into the boiler, and this is now producing some steam, that's the word I was looking for, and that's going to go through this belt into this machine over here. This is a turbine. Now, this is a huge building, as you can see. It's by far the largest building that we've made so far, and there is actually some stuff going in here, and this is now producing some power. Now, this is high voltage power, so it actually, even though it's standing on the foundation, it doesn't actually charge the foundation itself, so you have this completely being useless unless you connect it to the network. I've done it over here with a power pole, and then the power pole is connected to a transformer, and the transformer is actually what transfers the power to the actual grid. Now, you might be wondering what the point of this is, because right now it's just connected it to the grid it's actually standing on, but this also allows you to easily transport power across larger distances, of course, by means of these power poles. Now, just one of these turbines actually produced 3.6 megawatts of power, which is twice the amount that our previous power buildings were doing. On top of that, these are actually being prioritized by the game. So if you look at the stats, the high voltage grid is actually now being strained. That's because it's not producing enough power to power my entire factory, but this is just a single turbine, keep that in mind. But as you can see, the burner generators are barely doing anything at this point anymore, because this turbine is actually almost capable of powering my entire facility for the moment. However, of course, this is not going to cut it for very long, so let's scale things up just a wee bit. Okay, so I might have went a little bit overboard, but I decided to put up 6 of these boilers, and then of course 6 of these turbines as well. And honestly, it looks really nice if you look at how I connected these. I just put in a couple of these pumps in order to make sure the stuff keeps flowing, but honestly it doesn't feel like I really need it. As you can see, I've connected up all of these different boilers over here, and then the boilers are actually spitting out things in the middle over here with some nice little piping, and then the piping goes all the way over here and then down here through another pump, just because why not, and then it's connected all the way over here, and every 3 of these turbines actually put another pump just to ensure things keep flowing. Now, it doesn't actually tell you how big of a distance these pumps can actually cover, so I'm just putting them in wherever I think it makes sense after a little bit of distance, just to make sure I don't have to worry about that. And on the other side, look at all of these power poles and lights looking awesome, and that is actually being connected to a single power pole over here with 4 transformers to make sure all of that power can actually reach the base. Now, honestly, if everything would be optimized, I have 21 megawatts of power now up and running just from the turbines, and on top of that, that means each of these can actually only transfer 5 megawatts, so technically I need a 5th power station as well, a transformer I should say, in order to transfer all the power to the grid. But honestly, I still have all the burners and stuff like that as well, so I have way more power than I'm currently consuming. Let's see how much I am actually consuming. It's still about 4 megawatts, and I have over 20 in production just from the turbines now. So I think we're pretty good for the moment. That also means that this is the end of this particular episode, because we set up a huge amount of power. We scaled up our base massively. If you look at it like that, look at all of this. This is awesome. We have some power over here. We have steel production over there. Then we have all the basic production over here with all the red science. I actually can grab some of these basic materials like conveyor belts and stuff like that over here as well. So it's really convenient. And then all the way in the back over here, we have some electronics and wires being produced as well. And we still have plenty of room to go, but I think that will do it for now. It's also worth noting that we made a pretty substantial dent in the technology tree already, even after these 2 episodes. So all the stuff on the right here are done, well, with the exception of the last few things I actually still need to research. On the left side over here, there's a lot of upgrades that I already completed, and we can now start working our way down the middle again towards the Science Pack 3. So this is basically going to be green science. And honestly, even though it doesn't feel like we've done a lot, if you compare the size of the technology tree to what we've done already, it's about 1/3, I think maybe a quarter, that we completed. Now you might be wondering, did I see all of that? Well, no, you didn't, because there is a huge amount of cosmetics like walkways, doors, and things like that. And honestly, I've been kind of working with that and trying to make a nice looking actual building. But I don't necessarily like the cosmetic options a lot, and honestly there's a lot of productive stuff that I could be doing as well. So this is just me optimizing my own gameplay, but you can actually make some pretty interesting stuff. You can actually make things like office furniture and things like that, so you can really role play setting up a nice little production facility by yourself if you want to. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this one. Make sure you join me next time when we start exploring a new type of ore. We're actually going to upscale or the types of ore that we already have, and probably a lot of other fun stuff as well. If you're still here, you're awesome, and I do hope to catch you in the next one.